Amira Elghawaby, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.
What was your reaction to this attempted firebombing of the mosque in Peterborough?
Well, I think I was already, like many other Canadians and fellow global citizens, already reeling from the terrible attacks in Paris, as well as, of course, coming to grips with other attacks in other places in the world, including Beirut and Baghdad. So already dealing with that, responding with horror and shock and feeling very sad for the victims and their families. And then to hear then about, a potential hate crime in Peterborough, where a mosque, a place of worship, was attacked and set on fire. That was extremely distressing.
What are you hearing from your community, especially after this horrific attacks in Paris? Are they feeling that this is somehow going to affect Muslims in Canada, and how is going to affect them?
Right. So I think any time there is a sort of horrific event happening that is particularly playing out here, in Canada on our television screens, on the front pages, where there is this obvious attention to something tragic, and where the perpetrators, call themselves Muslims or, seem to be, acting out in this some diluted way, using Islam as their guise. I think there is always a concern that people who don't know a Muslim or Muslims, or people who don't understand what Islam actually stands for, may unfortunately act out their anger on their fellow neighbors or community members who are visibly Muslim in their communities. So what we've seen, because we do document hate crimes and hate incidents, is after these sorts of incidents, gain this sort of media coverage and people are talking about it understandably and sharing in that pain, that we will see a spike in incidents impacting Canadian Muslim communities, whether it's vandalism, whether it's verbal or physical harassments. We definitely do see a spike. Now, is it that more people are reporting it because there's a heightened awareness, or is it truly because there is an increase? Obviously, we can't tell because there's many that go unreported at any given time. So it's just something that we're very much more aware of, and there are a lot of concerns. So that's one aspect. The second aspect, of course, is just even in places where Canadian Muslims gather, whether it's at places of worship in this instance, whether it's in as young students, young children who go to school and where these conversations about what's happening globally are taking place. There's concern that the way that the story and the events are unfolding, that may have a negative impact on how students see each other and how they see themselves. And we're really encouraging educators to make sure that they create safe spaces so that students can express their feelings and can articulate their concerns, and so that they're not feeling stigmatized or marginalized by the acts of a tiny, deluded minority of people in this world who are acting out this way.
What would be your message to the general community out there about this? How the Muslim community feels about these attacks and how it affects them?
Well, I think the to the general community, I think many Canadians have already reached out to their fellow neighbors and friends who they know are Muslim in solidarity. For example, we saw in Peterborough almost immediately the local church community there started raising funds to help rebuild the mosque, so that there are already a lot of community members from all sorts of backgrounds who are reaching out to their fellow Canadian Muslim neighbors and friends and colleagues and peers, reiterating that, of course, they understand that these sorts of terrorist attacks have nothing to do with any religion. They are anti-religion. They're anti-humanity, and expressing that. And to those people out there who are Canadians out there who may not, have an experience meeting or knowing, a fellow Canadian Muslim, just reiterating that these acts and these actions that are being perpetrated in the name of Islam, have nothing to do with religion any more than the Ku Klux Klan has to do with Christianity, or any other terrorist act being done in the name of any other faith has to do with that particular religion. So I think that that's the message, and I think that as Canadians, these are the moments where our community relationships need to be stronger than ever, where we need to reach out to one another, ask questions, raise those questions, talk, and have an open dialogue, because together, we can face these sorts of challenges.
What kind of questions do you want the media to raise and you think are not being raised right now?
That's a good question. Well, I think the media, have been following, for example, the story of how these terrorist attacks have been impacting, just generally on all of us, on all people watching these events unfold in Paris. It also brings to attention that there are other terrorist attacks that are happening almost daily or weekly in other parts of the world that are also impacting Canadians here. For example, the attack in Beirut the day before Paris, there are many Canadian Lebanese community members, in Canada who are deeply impacted by those sorts of things. They're just as hurtful and painful as what we're witnessing with Paris. So I think the point is that many people are suffering around the world, and this impacts Canadians in a whole variety of ways, and it's really important to understand that. And for our social services that are interfacing with communities and providing either in the schools or in any other setting, that we're conscious of all these layers of identities and that people have, and how all that's going on globally does have an impact locally, and we need to make sure that there are dialogues available, that there's spaces, and that Canadian Muslims, just like any other Canadian, are committed to ensuring that we live in safe, welcoming, cohesive communities.